"What are you thinking?" he asked impatiently after a few moments. I lied again. "Just wondering where we're going." "It's a place I like to go when the weather is nice." We both glanced out the window at the thinning clouds after he spoke. "Charlie said it will be warm today." "And did you tell Charlie what you were up to?" he asked. "Nope." "But Jessica think we're going to Seattle together?" He seemed cheered by the idea. "No. I told her you canceled on me, which is true." "No one knows you're with me," angrily now. "That depends. I assumed you told Alice." "That's very helpful, Bella," he snapped. I pretending I didn't hear that. "Are you so depressed by Forks that it's made you suicidal?" he demanded when I ignored him. "You said it might cause trouble for you, us being together publicly," I reminded him. "So you're worried about the trouble it might cause me if you don't come home?" His voice was still angry and bitingly sarcastic. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the road. He muttered something under his breath, speaking so quickly that I couldn't understand. We were silent for the rest of the drive. I could feel the waves of infuriated disappointment rolling off of him, and I could think of nothing to say. And then the road ended, constricting to a thin foot trail with a small wooden marker. I parked on a narrow shoulder and stepped out, afraid because he was angry with me, and I didn't have driving as an excuse not to look at him. It was warm now, warmer than it had been in Forks since the day I'd arrived, almost muggy under the clouds. I pulled off my sweater and knotted it around my waist, growled that I wanted a light sleeveless shirt, especially if I had 5 miles of hiking ahead of me. I heard his door slam and looked over to see that he had removed his sweater too. He was facing away from me, onto the unbroken forest on the side of my truck. "This way," he said, glancing over his shoulder at me, eyes still annoyed. He started into the dark forest. "The trail?" Panic was clear in my voice as I hurried around the truck to catch up with him. I said there was a trail at the end of the road, not that we were taking it. "No trail?" I asked desperately. "I won't let you get lost." He turned then, with a mocking smile, and I stifled a gasp. His white shirt was sleeveless, and he wore it unbuttoned, so that the smooth white skin of his throat flowed uninterrupted over the marble contours of his chest. His perfect musculature no longer nearly hinted at behind concealing clothes. He was too perfect, I realized with a piercing stab of despair. There was no way this godlike creature could be meant for me. He stared at me, bewildered by my tortured expression. "Do you want to go home?" he said quietly, a different pain than mine saturating his voice. "No." I walked forward till I was close beside him, anxious not to waste 1 second of whatever time I might have with him. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I'm not a very good hiker," I answered dully. "You'll have to be very patient." "I can be patient, if I make a great effort." He smiled, holding my glance, trying to lift me out of my sudden unexplained dejection. I tried to smile back, but the smile was unconvincing. He scrutinized my face. "I'll take you home," he promised. I couldn't tell if the promise was unconditional or restricted to an immediate departure. I knew he thought it was fear that accepted me, and I was grateful again that I was the one person whose mind he couldn't hear. "If you want me to hike 5 miles through the jungle before sundown, you better start leading the way," I said acidly. He frowned at me, struggling to understand my tone and expression. He gave up after a moment and led the way into the forest. It wasn't as hard as I feared. The way was mostly flat, and he held the damp ferns and webs of moss aside from me. When a straight path took us over fallen trees and boulders, he would help me, lifting me by the elbow and then releasing me instantly when I was clear. His cold touch on my skin never failed to make my heart thud erratically. Twice, when that happened, I caught a look on his face that made me sure he could somehow hear it. I tried to keep my eyes away from his perfection as much as possible, but I slipped often. Each time his beauty pierced me through with slightness. For the most part, we walked in silence. Occasionally, he would ask a random question that he hadn't gotten to in the past 2 days of interrogation. He asked about my birthdays, my grade school teachers, my childhood pets, and I had to admit that after killing 3 fish in a row, I gave up on the whole institution. He laughed at that, louder than I was used to, bell-like echoes bouncing back from the empty woods. The hike took most of the morning, but he never showed any sign of impatience. The forest spread out in front of us in the boundless, ever-ending trees. I was beginning to worry that we'd never find our way out again. He was perfectly at ease, comfortable in the green maze, never seeming to see any doubt of our direction. After a few hours, the light that filtered through the canopy transformed, the mercury olive tone shifting into a bright new jade, and the day turned suddenly, just as he foretold. For the first time since we entered the woods, I felt a thrill of excitement, which quickly turned into impatience. "Are we there yet?" I teased, pretending to scowl. "Nearly." He smiled at the change in my mood. "Do you see the brightness ahead?" I peered into the thick forest. Should I?" He smirked. "Maybe it's a bit too soon for your eyes." "Time to visit the optometrist," I muttered. His smirk grew more pronounced. But then, after another 100 yards, I can definitely see a lightning in the trees ahead, a glow that was yellow instead of green. I picked up the pace, my eagerness growing with every step. He let me lead now, following noiselessly. I reached the edge of the pool of light and stepped through the last fringe of ferns into the loveliest place I had ever seen. The meadow was small, perfectly round, and filled with wildflowers, violet, yellow, and soft white. Somewhere nearby, I could hear the bubbling music of the stream. The sun was directly overhead, filling the circle with a haze of buttery sunshine. I walked slowly, awestruck, through his soft grass, swaying flowers, and warm gilded air. I halfway turned, wanting to share this with him, but he wasn't behind me where I thought he'd be. I spun around, searching for him with sudden alarm. Finally I spotted him, still under the dense shade of the canopy at the edge of the hollow, watching me with cautious eyes. Only then did I remember what the beauty of the meadow had driven from my mind, the enigma of Edward in the sun, which he promised to illustrate for me today. I took a step back toward him, my eyes alight with curiosity. His eyes were wary, reluctant. I smiled encouragingly and beckoned to him with my hand, taking another step back to him. He held up a hand in warning, and I hesitated, rocking back onto my heels. Edward seemed to take a deep breath, and then he stepped out into the bright glow of the midday sun.